Hello, and welcome to the ParAqua-COST, the science podcast that shines a light on the newest and most interesting research being conducted in the fields of aquatic and marine ecology. My name is Joe Money. I'm a PhD student and the host of this podcast. Today, I'll be interviewing Daniel Fajfer, a PhD student at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poland. We'll be discussing his research on Brachiopods and the ecosystem services provided by small ponds and wetlands. Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Really nice to have you on. What the listeners probably don't know is that me and Daniel actually are in the same department at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan. So we see each other quite often, and he's told me a lot about his work, and it sounded really interesting. So I thought I'd invite him on the show. And yeah, thanks, Daniel, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really cool because basically we both work on brachiopods because cladocerans are also brachiopods, but not large brachiopods, but I think we will talk about it later.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, my research is to do with Daphnia. I often refer to them as Cladocera and crustaceans to explain to people, but you're right. You're completely right that we actually work in very similar areas. Yeah, so Daniel, can you give us a quick summary of your education and research background just to fill the listeners in a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. As you said, I am currently a PhD student at Department of General Zoology, the same as you, and I am working on aquatic biology right now. But previously, I've done my both bachelor degree and master degree on the study course on environmental protection. But my bachelor thesis was entirely about morphology of pupal stages of cecida moths. And my master thesis was done on the zoogeography of Arctine moths of National Gorongosa Park of Mozambique. So it is quite different topics that than I am doing right now because it was entirely terrestrial biology, but I was sitting in the topic of invertebrates like most of the time. So right now I'm transferred to something else, but I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's quite a turn, really, from so much work on moths to suddenly working on aquatic invertebrates like you're working on now. But I think that's honestly very common for scientists and biologists in particular, sort of bouncing around study subjects, but still maintaining the same interest in ecology, environmental protection, zoology, stuff like that.
I would also like to mention that I was working for several years in the sericulture, but not like industry, but entirely like in the scientific institute that had a department of silkworm breeding and mulberry cultivation, and I was like a part of the project that was maintaining the wide variety of silkworm strains from all over the world. And but it was like, most part of scientific work, part of technical work. Yeah, and from that, I transferred entirely to the PhD program I am working right now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of scientists also take that path, don't they? They sort of work as technicians and develop the sort of key lab skills and then apply it in a PhD quite often, as you've done. So what actually brought you to Poznan? Are you from Poznan originally? I'm embarrassed to say that I don't actually know that about you.
I'm not like entirely from Poznań. I born in Gniezno. Gniezno is known in Poland most as it was the first capital of Poland, but it was, like hundreds of years ago. And I was living in there like for, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years. Then I moved out to the little village Mienko near Pobiedziska village. And it was also like a cool thing because it was like very close to nature. environment, very close to also protected area, for example, Puszcza Zielonka, Rezerwat Przyrody Jezioro Dębiniec. Sorry for Polish.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Just what sort of natural reserves are these? Sort of wetlands or?
Yes, yeah. So the reservoir of natural reservoir Lake Jezioro Dębiniec is like a reservoir made because of the unique plants that were growing around the Lake Dębiniec. And yeah, after, I don't know, maybe 10 years, I moved to Poznań, mainly because I started studying environment protection here. So yeah, it was quite a lot of moving. Even in Gniezno, I was always moving, so I am used to that. But yeah, now I'm in Poznań.
Yeah, as is the life of a PhD student quite often, isn't it? Moving around a lot. Well, it sounds like you've already answered my next question already, but is there anything that made you shift from studying Lepidoptera, moths, and butterflies into now the freshwater ecology that you study at the moment and Brachiopods? I mean, it sounds like you've lived near some amazing wetlands. Was that key in your transfer when you started studying your PhD?
You know, Lepidopterans and general insects was the first part that really caught me and caught my interest into field of biology. And I always knew that the other most interesting group of animals for me were crustaceans. And I always knew that I want to do some research, maybe on insects, maybe on crustaceans. But you know, it is funny thing to say because those groups are very diverse and very abundant with species. But after several years working with lepidopterans, I got a little bit used of it, and when I saw a possibility in doing a PhD in applying to a project which was mainly focused on aquatic crustaceans, which are brachiopods, of course. It was, you know, I wouldn't hesitate. For me, it was like a new opportunity to try something new that I was really appeal of, but not really had I didn't have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a thing, isn't it, that you end up, uh, trying out new things all the time in science, and that's one of the reasons I really like it. I can't speak for you, but that's a very interesting journey that you've had from from moths to brachiopods. So actually, another question that I was going to ask, just to clarify for some of our listeners, but can you explain what large brachiopods are and what your current research aims to learn about them? I mean, me and you, obviously, we have a bit of knowledge in this area, but just for people who aren't familiar what a branchiopod is, could you describe them?
Okay, so large brachiopods are crustaceans which are almost completely exclusive and associated with temporary aquatic ecosystems. They are considered as living fossils because they exist for several millions of years and haven't changed much in comparisons to their fossilized ancestors. The term large is quite relative, but it somewhat differs them from cladocerans, which are brachiopods, as we talk about, and besides being in most cases smaller than other brachiopods, their biology is also different. They often inhabit permanent water bodies, which with large brachiopods almost never occurs. As large brachiopods exist in temporary aquatic ecosystems, they must in some way survive the period of drought, and they do it by laying cysts. And cysts are dormant eggs, which lies in the sediment of dried ponds. And during the next filling with water, which can occur during the rainfall, the snow melting or even elevating the level of groundwater, then larval form of branchiopod emerges.
Yeah, that's very cool. Can you give us a little bit of context about like how, like you mentioned that large is a very relative term here, but what sort of sizes are we talking about? And also, how could you describe temporary freshwater ecosystems to people who might not be familiar with quite what that means?
Yeah, the temporary water ecosystems is simply ecosystems that tend to dry out seasonally. And we can differ many type of temporary ponds from puddles even to larger ponds that dry during, for example, even 2 or 3 months in summer. And considering your question about the size of the large brachiopods, they can even grow to like more than 10 centimeters when we are talking about Notus tracans. So they can be really big. This is the maybe one reason that that they are called tadpole shrimps. The one thing is that they resemble a little bit a tadpole, and the other thing that they can grow quite large. And comparing to the cladocerans, where they like the biggest ones may be several millimeters, or maybe I am wrong. Some are very long, like Leptodora kindi or other. They have very elongated bodies, but maybe when we are talking at the general size, the brachiopods can be quite big animals. Oh, and my main research aim is to assess the role of large brachiopods in their ecosystems, as well as ecosystem services that they provide, which can expand out of their habitat. Large brachiopods are considered a keystone species of temporary ponds or the architects of their ecosystems. This means that they play the key role in transforming the ecosystem in which they exist, having impact on many of its aspects, from properties of water through abundance of algae and cyanobacteria up to species compositions of other invertebrates. For example, notostracans are apex predators and detritus eaters. Anus tracans are superfiltrators, and clam shrimps are scrapers and filtrators. And those names I mentioned are all the main orders of brachiopods.
So basically, what you're saying is that the brachiopods play a really key role in sort of keeping these ecosystems diverse and keeping them healthy, for a lack of a scientific term.
Yes, exactly. And this is the main reason why the Biodiversa Respond project, which I am part of as a PhD student, was made. This project, its main goal is to assess the importance of temporary ponds as well as brachiopods as keystones organisms of this ecosystem. And it is led by research teams from 4 different countries: Poland, Belgium, Spain, and Morocco. The project has many activities and experiments, but probably the biggest and most complex, I think, is joint mesocosm experiment. It is called joint because it is conducted separately in each country, and its main philosophy is to set in the open area artificial ecosystems called mesocosm, in which we put our large brachiopods and observe how they are changing these mesocosms. It includes many measurements such as water quality changes, phyto and zooplankton community changes, periphyton growth, and many others. Polish team members, which I was part, visited Spanish team this year in February to help them with their experiment. So we also conducted our part this year in June. It is interesting because it took like several months of preparation with only 3 weeks of actual experiment working. So yeah, it was quite of a logistic challenge for us.
It sounds really good though, having such a wide-ranging international project. And yeah, it sounds like you're going to learn a lot from these mesocosms. Do you have any like preliminary results that you can talk about? Like how did these brachiopods end up shaping these mesocosms?
Yes, yes, we have many preliminary results and a lot of that data we can work on. And the fact is, and it is very positive for us that we see the influence of brachiopods of these ecosystems. They change them there a lot, and in some ways that we expected, but in some way that we couldn't predict. For example, we knew that Notus trincans as a detritus eater will probably higher the level of turbidity in the ecosystems. So one thing we didn't expect that the Notus trincans will reduce the abundance of filamentous algae in our mesocosm.
Nice. So all of the different orders, I guess, play a different role in sort of stimulating the ecosystems. Is that accurate?
Yes, 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 exactly, exactly.
So me and Daniel share a department at our university, and I often walk into our communal lab and see him working on these aquariums sort of filled with sediment, and also what's inside that is really interested me is these little fairy shrimps, and they are really uh, interesting to look at. I think they swim upside down, is that right? And they have this really interesting sort of fluorescent sort of wavy way of swimming, and they look like something straight out of uh, the Jurassic era or something like that. So that's definitely one part of your research that has really piqued my interest. Can you tell us a bit more about these fairy shrimps?
Yes, fairy shrimps are really interesting. Is one like the most known by ordinary people that ordinary like people who don't know anything about brachiopods. They probably seen or heard about fairy shrimp because fairy shrimp are often breed as a feed for fish. Uh, and Artemia salina is one of the example of species that is used for it. But talking generally about fairy shrimps, there are as old group as the other, and as you said, is true that they swim like upside down with their legs on the up, and they have some species have even a fluorescent X-ax that shines, and it is
Wow.
yes, and it is a way to show the male where the female is, because obviously the exact female has an exact, and sometimes in very turbid water, it is very hard for the male to see anything, and the exact is like the part it can only see. And as the all large brachiopods, fairy shrimps also survive periods of droughts in the dormant states, and they're like kind of an interesting part of brachiopods because, as I said, they are super filtrators. They're filtrating algae and bacteria, other organisms, and even that organic matter from the water. So they can affect really the quality of water that they live in. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're definitely worth Googling or something like that because they do look
Yes, yes,
really
yeah, exactly.
charismatic and really interesting to look at. But that actually leads perfectly on to my next question, which was going to be, well, what ecosystem services do these small temporary ponds provide in the wider context of the environment and also the effects of these particular brachiopods?
Yeah, you know, the first and foremost, I think, service that provides temporary ponds is that they are the cradles of biodiversity. A big chunk of invertebrate fauna, especially insects, has at least some part of the development stage dependent on the temporary ponds and wetlands. This applies to some vertebrates also, such as amphibians, which some species breed, lay eggs, and develop in temporary waters. Absence of fish in these types of ecosystems enables many other species of animals as well as plants to develop and thrive. These ecosystems are also an important source of nutrients to organisms living outside of them, such as birds, which are often dependent on temporary flooding plains. The existence of temporary waters also play important role for people, helping to maintain optimal levels of groundwater and even preventing floods of households and infrastructure. They are one of the most important aspects of holding water in forests, preventing trees from drying from the lack of water. So the another ecosystem services that temporary ponds can give is guttering pollution. It is not good for the pond that is very diverse, but it's an opportunity of making artificial ponds, for example, gathering pollutions from the agricultural regions or from the road infrastructure. And the temporary ponds also holds a lot of carbon, which helps the climate change problem.
Wow, okay, I didn't know hardly any of that actually. I didn't know that they had such wide-ranging effects on the ecosystem. I think often temporary ponds and wetlands often get a bit of a negative sort of press in the public because of biting insects and mosquitoes living there. But you're completely right that that is like a diversity hotspot as well.
Yeah, you know, it's very unfortunate that the public opinion about the temporary ponds is like it is only a problem or the obstacle in development. And when something needed to be changed in environment or built on, the pond is not like something which someone should care of. It often ends up buried or you know, completely wiped out of the landscape because it hinders the development.
Okay, so Daniel, final question. Where do you hope this research will take you? And do you have any upcoming projects that you're excited about, maybe a little bit different to the Brachiopods or in a similar area?
Yeah, I think that in at least near future, I will be focused mainly on brachiopods. And my future research plans is to do a lot of experiments about ecological relationships between brachiopods and other invertebrate groups that inhabits temporary ponds, especially insects like aquatic beetles, dragonfly larvae, mayfly larvae. Their relationships can be wide from basic concurrence to predation behaviors. The other thing that I would want to research is what factors make the brachiopods eggs to hatch, because water, surprisingly, is not only factor that determines that the old cyst bank in the temporary ponds can hatch. And as far as we know, there can be a lot of different factors that can influence this event.
Nice, that sounds really cool. And especially the stuff about the interaction of insect larvae with the temporary freshwater ecosystem. That sounds really up my street. So maybe we'll have to collaborate on that because I'd really love to do some work on that, particularly around like mosquitoes and biting flies. I find that stuff very interesting. So
Yes, exactly. I'm looking forward to it.
okay, well, keep me in the loop. And yeah, okay, so I guess all that's left to say is thank you very much for coming on, Daniel. Thanks for taking some time to talk about your research, and I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The ParAqua podcast was funded by COST, the European Cooperation in Science and Technology, and is a product of the ParAqua Action Group. If you are interested in joining an action group or just want to know more, please go to www.ParAqua-COST.eu or follow the link in the episode description. The podcast is produced by myself and Serena Rasconi, and the Science Communication Coordinator is Anna Gavrilovich. Once again, thanks for listening, and see you next time on the ParAqua podcast.